Leonardo liked to draw horses, specifically horse legs. Straight, bent, from the front, from the side, three-quarter view, every which way, over and over. 500 years later, Josef Koudelka photographed the same wall, dividing the Middle East. Not as a news story, not as a particular statement. He just returned to it over and over. So today I'd like to share what I feel that they both understood and how it compelled them to what some might seem just repeating the same thing over and over again. Because I think it can change the way that we look through our cameras. Before we dive in, just want to say welcome back to those of you who've been here before. First time here, special welcome to you. So what do we do here? Well, in the simplest of terms, we look at artists from the past, but not only their work, but how they saw their world, and how it just might help us see ours a little bit differently every now and then. Leonardo, we all know the name, Mona Lisa, Last Supper, the inventions, the endless anatomy studies. But the thing that actually consumed him wasn't just the painting or the drawing, it was the looking. He dissected cadavers at night by candlelight. He would sit beside rivers and just watch the water curl. And he drew the same things: wings, birds in flight, horses, tendons, muscles, eyes, over and over again. He wasn't just simply practicing. He was trying to see beneath the surface of things. Josef Koudelka was born in Czechoslovakia and became internationally known as a photographer during the Soviet invasion of 1968. For much of his life, he was kind of a stateless photographer, moving through the world with a little bit more than just his camera and his curiosity. And later, he found himself drawn to a wall connected to conflict, history, and separation. But instead of just photographing it once and moving on, he kept going back. 4 years and 7 trips, same wall. And right there's where I think we just might have more in common with these two than we originally thought. Because both Leonardo and Koudelka both understood that returning to something over and over again doesn't mean it doesn't have something new to say. Sometimes it just means you hadn't finished looking. When Leonardo was drawing horses' legs, he wasn't drawing them over and over again just to get better at it. I think he was drawing them to see what he was missing. The leg really hadn't changed, but his capacity to see it did. And this is where I think that repetition becomes something more than just repetition. It can become revelation. The same thing pretty much happened with Koudelka and his wall. The early images may feel a little bit more documentary, but over time, they began to feel like something else, almost meditations, almost some of them abstractions. The wall became a lens for looking at everything around it. A line, a shadow, a break in the horizon. He once said, "This is a place where photography is waiting for me, and I go back so many times till I get it." And for me here, there's just one place I've been going to for about 4 years now. Keep going back. It's not a very large place on the coast. It's got more history than most people even around here know about. But to me, it's just a place that has a soul that has so many stories it wants to tell. Every time I go back, I see something different. Sometimes something new, but often something I've seen many times before. But right now, I guess I'm seeing it differently. The place really hadn't changed as much as I have. And maybe that's just what Leonardo and Koudelka really understood. The purpose of returning isn't always to find a new subject. Maybe it's just because to see the old one a little bit clearer. Leonardo didn't wake up one day and just decide he was going to study fluid dynamics for the next 15 years. There was something about water that just wouldn't answer a question he had. So he just kept looking. His drawings of the deluge keep returning to the same ideas again and again. Movement, chaos, destruction, and the way that nature just overwhelms everything in its path. Koudelka had the same relationship with the things he photographed. The wall was just one of them. There were also people and landscapes that he returned to throughout his career. Gypsies, exiles, the Black Triangle, all great projects to look into. Different subjects, perhaps, but the same impulse. He wasn't always just choosing a project. Sometimes the project might have been choosing him, and that just might be true for us as well. The subject you keep photographing and it begins to make you wonder, why do I keep taking pictures of this? Well, I don't think it's evidence of a failure of imagination. It just might be that the real work's trying to announce itself. I used to think I had a problem photographing the same thing over and over again. Same place, same street, same kind of light. I began to think that I needed to find something different, move on. I was stuck in a rut. But after looking at Leonardo and Koudelka a little bit deeper, I began to see it another way. That subject that I was going back to over and over again, it wasn't a rut. It was really a conversation. And you don't walk away from a conversation just because you're worried about somebody thinking you've been talking too long. You stay with it and you listen. And eventually, it just might tell you why you were drawn there in the first place. When you keep coming back to the same subject, you begin to develop a language. Not in a style the way that, we usually talk about having a style. Not a preset, a particular lens, or a shade of black and white. Something different, something deeper. To me, it's a way of choosing, a way of noticing, and a way of making decisions that gradually become your own. Look at Leonardo's studies. He wasn't just collecting information about human anatomy, horses, or even water. Over time, those subjects began to move through his hand in a different way. His lines began to suggest movement. His figures, they feel alive even though they're not moving. Leonardo just didn't learn how a horse was built. He developed a way of expressing the energy inside the horse. The same thing happened with Koudelka. The wall is not just a wall anymore. It becomes a vocabulary of empty space. You could remove his name from any of these photographs, I think, and you'd still know that they were his. Not because every image looks the same, because he truly understood in all of his decisions of photographing how things are connected. And for me, I think that's what's slowly starting to happen with the places I'm photographing. After returning to the same kind of places over and over again over the past 4 or 5 years, I'm noticing that I'm not trying to find everything anymore. I began to look for, certain relationships, a figure at the edge of a frame, a long diagonal disappearing into the distance, And after a while, those choices just consciously appeared before I actually made them. I'd be reviewing the image, looking through them after I got back home and go, well, there it is again. Any of you ever looked back through your photographs and realized you're photographing the same thing over and over again? At first, it can feel like a limitation. But what if it's actually the beginning of your visual language? Leonardo kept returning because he was just trying to understand life. Koudelka kept returning because the wall was large enough to hold all his questions. And perhaps we return because somewhere inside those repeated images is just a sentence we hadn't finished yet. So the next time you find yourself photographing a place that you've been to a few times, don't dismiss it too quickly. Look at what keeps returning. Not only the subject, but your choices. Because that part of your photography might be just what's truly yours. Not the subject itself, but the way you see it. But either way, remember to have fun with it. And as always, let's create something real.